Marcus Wellington strode into Judge Judy's courtroom wearing a suit that cost more than most people earn in 3 months. The navy blue Armani fabric caught the courtroom lights perfectly, tailored so precisely it looked painted onto his athletic frame. On his left wrist gleamed a Rolex Presidential worth $50,000, and diamond cufflinks sparkled at his sleeves as he adjusted his Italian silk tie. His black leather briefcase, handcrafted in Florence, swung casually at his side. Everything about Marcus Wellington screamed wealth, power, and supreme confidence. At 43 years old, he was the founder and CEO of Wellington Tech Solutions, a Fortune 500 company with 15,000 employees and annual revenues exceeding $3 billion. His personal net worth had been estimated at $500 million by Forbes just 3 months earlier. He carried himself like a man who had never been told no, never faced a problem that money and lawyers couldn't solve, and never met an authority figure he couldn't either charm or intimidate into submission. Marcus was here today because his former executive assistant, Sarah Martinez, had sued him for wrongful termination, workplace harassment, and wage theft. She claimed he had fired her after she refused to falsify financial documents for investors. Marcus thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Sarah had been a decent assistant for 3 years, handling his schedule, managing his correspondence, and keeping his coffee cup filled. But when she started questioning his business decisions and refusing direct orders, she had to go. That's how business works. Employees who can't follow instructions get replaced with ones who can. He'd offered her a generous severance package and a non-disclosure agreement. She'd refused both and filed this absurd lawsuit instead. Now he had to waste an entire afternoon dealing with this nonsense on some television court show. His lawyers had advised him to settle quietly, make the problem disappear with money like he always did. But Marcus Wellington didn't settle with subordinates. He crushed them. He wanted Sarah to understand what happens when you challenge someone with real power. The truth was, Marcus had researched Judge Judy before coming here. He knew she was tough, that she had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. But ultimately, she was just a television personality, a former family court judge who now entertained audiences with small claims disputes. He'd faced real judges in real courtrooms with real stakes, federal judges overseeing multi-million-dollar corporate litigation. This was going to be easy. He'd explain the situation in terms even a TV judge could understand, paint Sarah as a disgruntled employee seeking attention and money, and walk out with his reputation intact. Maybe his PR team could even spin this into a positive story about a successful CEO facing down frivolous lawsuits. After all, he was Marcus Wellington. He'd built a tech empire from nothing, disrupted entire industries, and made himself $500 million before turning 45. Some small-time judge wasn't going to intimidate him. But Marcus Wellington made one catastrophic mistake that afternoon. He underestimated exactly who he was dealing with. He walked into that courtroom thinking his wealth, his status, and his corporate power would protect him the way they always had. He believed he could dismiss Judge Judy the same way he dismissed everyone else who questioned him, subordinates, journalists, even government regulators. What Marcus didn't understand was that Judge Judy had spent decades seeing through people exactly like him. She'd built her career on cutting through pretense, exposing liars, and delivering justice regardless of who sat in front of her. She didn't care about Fortune 500 companies or 9-figure net worths. In her courtroom, a billionaire CEO had exactly the same standing as a grocery store clerk. And Marcus Wellington was about to learn that lesson in the most painful, public, and expensive way imaginable. What happened next would become the most viral courtroom moment of the year. Marcus didn't just lose his case. He didn't just face financial penalties. His open mockery of Judge Judy, combined with the devastating evidence his former assistant had been quietly gathering for months, triggered a cascade of consequences that destroyed everything he'd spent 20 years building. His arrogance would cost him his company, his fortune, his freedom, and his reputation. The smug confidence he walked in with would turn to desperate panic as his entire empire collapsed in real time, broadcast to millions of viewers who watched a powerful man learn that no amount of money makes you untouchable. If you've watched this far, don't miss the end of the video. Like the video, sit back, and enjoy listening to the story, because what you're about to witness will be the most expensive mockery in corporate history. This insult will cost Marcus Wellington absolutely everything he's built, and it all starts with him making the fatal mistake of thinking he's smarter than everyone else in the room. Tuesday afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The bailiff's voice echoed through Judge Judy's courtroom with practiced authority. The case of Martinez versus Wellington Tech Solutions. Marcus Wellington walked to the defendant's table with the casual confidence of someone entering his own conference room. He didn't hurry. He didn't show even a hint of nervousness. Instead, he glanced around the courtroom with barely concealed amusement, taking in the cameras, the audience, and finally Judge Judy herself sitting behind her bench. Sarah Martinez, his former assistant, sat at the plaintiff's table looking nervous but determined. She wore a simple business suit, her hands folded tightly in front of her, and her eyes fixed straight ahead. The contrast between them couldn't have been more stark. She looked like someone fighting for justice. He looked like someone annoyed at having to be there at all. Judge Judy looked up from the case file she'd been reviewing, her sharp eyes immediately assessing Marcus Wellington. She'd seen thousands of defendants over her decades on the bench, and she could read people within seconds of meeting them. What she saw in Marcus Wellington was familiar. The expensive suit, the dismissive body language, the barely concealed contempt for the proceedings. Another wealthy defendant who thought money made him special. "Good afternoon, Mr. Wellington," Judge Judy said with professional courtesy. Marcus barely nodded in her direction, pulling out his phone and glancing at the screen. "Yeah, let's make this quick. I have actual important meetings after this." "Not your honor." Not even a basic acknowledgement of courtroom protocol. Just the casual dismissal you'd give to someone interrupting your lunch. Judge Judy's expression didn't change, but everyone who knew her recognized the dangerous calm in her voice. "Mr. Wellington, put that phone away immediately." Marcus sighed dramatically, like a teenager being told to clean his room. "Fine, whatever. But can we speed this up? I'm losing money every minute I sit here." Judge Judy set down her pen and gave Marcus her full attention. "Mr. Wellington, you're being sued by your former executive assistant, Ms. Sarah Martinez. She claims you fired her for refusing to falsify financial reports to investors. She's seeking $500,000 in damages for wrongful termination, emotional distress, and retaliation. How do you respond to these allegations?" Marcus actually laughed, a condescending sound that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Your Honor, and I use that term loosely, this entire case is completely absurd. Sarah was my assistant for 3 years. She answered phones, scheduled meetings, and filed paperwork. She was adequate at those tasks, nothing special, but adequate. Then suddenly she started having delusions about understanding corporate finance and questioning decisions way above her pay grade. When she couldn't handle the pressure of working for a real company with real stakes, she got emotional and had to be let go. Now she wants a payday for her own incompetence. It's a tale as old as time." The courtroom fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to pause at the sheer arrogance in Marcus's voice. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Wellington, Ms. Martinez claims you explicitly ordered her to modify financial documents to hide $50 million in quarterly losses from investors. That's not about handling pressure. That's about fraud." Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with a smirk that suggested he found the entire proceeding beneath him. "Look, Judge Judy, is it? Let's be realistic here. I run a Fortune 500 company. Do you understand what that means? I make decisions every single day that affect thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in revenue. I deal with SEC regulations, shareholder expectations, board dynamics, and market pressures that are frankly way too complex for this kind of venue. Sarah was an assistant who filed papers and answered phones. She wouldn't know actual corporate fraud if it came with an instruction manual. This is just a disgruntled employee making up stories because she couldn't cut it in the big leagues. Judge Judy's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Mr. Wellington, I'm not interested in hearing about your resume or your company's revenue. I asked you a specific question. Did you or did you not ask Ms. Martinez to falsify financial documents? Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Your Honor, with all due respect, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, this is way above your pay grade to understand. Corporate law, SEC filings, GAAP accounting principles, investor relations, these are incredibly nuanced areas. Maybe we should stick to what you know best. Broken fences, loud neighbors, small claims disputes between regular people. This is big boy business, and frankly, you're just not equipped to grasp the complexities involved here. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Several audience members shook their heads in disbelief. Sarah Martinez's eyes widened in shock at Marcus's blatant disrespect. Even the bailiff looked stunned. But Marcus seemed completely unbothered by the reaction, actually appearing pleased with himself for what he clearly thought was a clever way to dismiss the proceedings. Judge Judy's expression remained perfectly controlled, but anyone who knew her recognized the deadly calm that had settled over her features. She'd been practicing law for over 40 years, and in all that time, she'd developed an extraordinary ability to remain composed even when facing the most arrogant defendants. Mr. Wellington, she said with ice in her voice, I've been practicing law since before you were born. I've handled everything from family court to complex litigation. So let me be very clear. In this courtroom, you will show respect, you will answer questions directly, and you will stop wasting everyone's time with your condescending speeches. Do I make myself clear? Marcus actually smirked at her, shaking his head like a parent dealing with a stubborn child. Sure, sure. Whatever you say, Judge. Can we move this along now? Some of us have actual responsibilities waiting. Judge Judy turned her attention to Sarah Martinez, who sat nervously at the plaintiff's table, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a folder full of documents. Ms. Martinez, please tell the court exactly what happened. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself. Your Honor, I worked as Mr. Wellington's executive assistant for 3 years. I had excellent performance reviews every quarter. I handled sensitive information, coordinated with the board of directors, and managed confidential communications. In March of this year, Mr. Wellington called me into his office 2 days before the quarterly earnings call. He handed me the financial reports and told me to modify the numbers before they went to investors. Specifically, he wanted me to hide $50 million in losses by spreading them across different accounting categories and pushing some expenses into the next quarter. When I told him that would be fraud and that I could go to jail for participating in it, he told me that rich people don't go to jail for white-collar crimes and that I needed to stop being naive about how business actually works. Marcus Wellington interrupted with a loud, theatrical laugh that echoed through the courtroom. This is absolutely ridiculous. She's completely making this up. Your Honor, this woman is clearly lying for attention and a payday. She watched too many movies about evil corporate bosses and decided to create a fantasy where she's the heroic whistleblower. In reality, she made repeated mistakes in basic administrative tasks, couldn't handle constructive criticism, and got emotional when I tried to give her feedback about her performance. That's it. That's the whole story. Everything else is pure fiction designed to extract money from my company. Judge Judy held up her hand, silencing him. Mr. Wellington, you'll get your turn to present your defense. Right now, Ms. Martinez is speaking. You will not interrupt her again. Marcus rolled his eyes dramatically but settled back in his chair, pulling out his phone again and scrolling through messages as if the testimony was simply background noise to his important business dealings. Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger now. Your Honor, I have evidence. Extensive evidence. Emails, text messages, and recorded phone conversations where Mr. Wellington explicitly told me to falsify the financial reports. She opened her folder and pulled out printed copies of email exchanges, each one carefully highlighted and annotated. In this email from March 14, Mr. Wellington writes, and I quote, "Sarah, adjust the Q1 numbers as discussed. Make sure the loss appears minimal. Investors don't need to see the full picture yet. We'll recover in Q2 and no one will ever know." And when I responded expressing concerns about the legality, he replied, "Your job is to do what I tell you, not to play lawyer. NDAs exist for a reason. No one will believe you anyway if you try to make trouble." Marcus suddenly sat up straight, his casual demeanor cracking slightly. "Those emails are taken completely out of context. And by the way, recording private business conversations without consent is probably illegal. This whole case should be thrown out based on unlawfully obtained evidence." Judge Judy examined the emails carefully, her experienced eye scanning every detail. "Mr. Wellington, these emails appear quite clear. They show explicit instructions to modify financial data with awareness that such modifications would mislead investors. How exactly am I taking them out of context?" Marcus stood up abruptly, his face flushing red with anger and perhaps the first hint of actual worry. "Your Honor, and I'm being generous using that title for someone who's basically a television personality playing judge for ratings, you clearly don't understand how corporate communications work. When I said adjust the numbers, I meant present them more clearly. Every company does this. It's called a strategic financial presentation. It's not fraud. It's business. But I wouldn't expect someone whose experience is limited to small claims court and daytime television to grasp these nuances. You're out of your depth here. Way out of your depth. This is like asking a kindergarten teacher to explain quantum physics. You simply don't have the background or expertise to understand what you're looking at." The courtroom fell into shocked silence. Several audience members gasped audibly. Sarah Martinez's mouth dropped open in disbelief. The bailiff actually took a step forward, anticipating that Judge Judy might need assistance maintaining order. But Judge Judy simply sat there, perfectly still, her eyes locked on Marcus Wellington with an expression that made several people in the audience actually feel sorry for him despite his arrogance. Subscribe to Judge Stories if you believe wealth should never place anyone above accountability. Judge Judy's voice became so quiet that everyone in the courtroom had to lean forward to hear her. That quietness was more terrifying than any shouting could have been. "Mr. Wellington, sit down. Right now." Marcus hesitated, suddenly realizing that perhaps he'd crossed a line, but his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. He sat, but the smug expression remained plastered on his face. Judge Judy turned back to Sarah Martinez. "Ms. Martinez, you mentioned you have recorded conversations. I'd like to hear them." Sarah nodded, pulling out a small digital recorder from her folder. Her hands shook slightly as she set it up, but her voice was steady. "Your Honor, I started recording conversations with Mr. Wellington after the first time he asked me to falsify documents. I knew I might need protection. This recording is from March 20th, 2 weeks before he fired me." The courtroom fell silent as Sarah pressed play. Marcus Wellington's voice came through the speaker, crystal clear and unmistakable. "Sarah, I don't care if you think it's fraud. I'm not asking for your legal opinion. I'm telling you to make the numbers work. Move the losses to different categories. Push some expenses into next quarter. Make it look like we're profitable this quarter. That's your job." Sarah's voice responded on the recording, nervous but firm. "Mr. Wellington, if I do this, I could be charged with securities fraud. We could both go to jail." Marcus's laugh came through the speaker, the same condescending sound he'd made multiple times today. "Go to jail? Sarah, honey, rich people don't go to jail for white-collar stuff. That's for poor criminals who rob convenience stores. The worst that happens is we pay a fine, and the company's legal budget is bigger than most people's mortgages. Besides, even if somehow this became a problem, which it won't, who do you think they'll believe? A billionaire CEO who runs a Fortune 500 company, or some assistant who answers phones for a living? You think your word means anything compared to mine? I'll bury you in legal fees before you even get to trial. I'll make sure you never work in any industry again. You'll be lucky to get a job at McDonald's by the time my lawyers are done with you." The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Marcus Wellington's face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. For the first time since entering the courtroom, he looked genuinely worried. "That recording is illegal. It's inadmissible. She recorded me without my consent in a private office. Your Honor, you can't allow this." Judge Judy's expression was carved from stone. "Mr. Wellington, in many states, including this one, only one party needs to consent to a recording. Ms. Martinez was part of that conversation. The recording is perfectly legal." She paused, letting that sink in. "But let's move past the recording for a moment. Ms. Martinez, you mentioned you're not the only employee Mr. Wellington treated this way. Can you elaborate?" Sarah took a deep breath, and for the first time, a small smile crossed her face. "Yes, Your Honor. After he fired me, I reached out to other former employees. I found 12 people over the past 3 years who were fired under similar circumstances. All of them were asked to participate in fraudulent activities. All of them refused. All of them were terminated and forced to sign non-disclosure agreements under threat of career destruction. All of them were told the same thing, that no one would believe them over Marcus Wellington. And Your Honor, 7 of those former employees are here today, outside this courtroom, ready to testify if you'll allow them." Marcus jumped to his feet again, his composure completely shattered. "This is a conspiracy. She organized a witch hunt against me. Your Honor, this is character assassination, this is orchestrated defamation, this is. He struggled to find words, his usual smooth corporate speech failing him completely. Judge Judy held up her hand. "Mr. Wellington, I'm going to allow 3 of these witnesses to provide brief testimony. Bailiff, please bring in the first witness." Over the next 20 minutes, 3 former Wellington Tech employees told nearly identical stories. A financial analyst who was fired for refusing to manipulate quarterly reports. A compliance officer who was terminated after questioning irregular accounting practices. A senior accountant who was forced out after refusing to sign off on falsified documents. Each one described the same pattern. Marcus Wellington would order them to do something illegal, they would refuse, he would threaten them with career destruction, and then he would fire them and force them to sign NDAs by threatening to blacklist them from the entire industry. Each witness produced documentation, emails, text messages, recorded conversations. The evidence piled up like an avalanche, and Marcus Wellington sat at the defendant's table watching his entire world collapse in real time. When the testimonies concluded, Marcus made one final desperate attempt to regain control. He stood up, straightened his expensive suit, and looked directly at Judge Judy with what he probably thought was commanding presence. "Your Honor, Judge Judy, whatever you want to be called, you need to understand something. This is all being blown completely out of proportion. Yes, business involves difficult decisions. Yes, sometimes financial presentations require creativity. But this is how corporate America actually works. Every CEO in every Fortune 500 company has to make these kinds of decisions. You're sitting there in your television courtroom, judging me for operating in the real world with real consequences and real pressure that you couldn't possibly understand. You handle small disputes. You deal with petty arguments between regular people. I run a $3 billion company. I employ 15,000 people. My decisions affect the entire tech industry. So with all due respect, and I'm trying really hard to be respectful here despite how absurd this circus has become, you're simply not qualified to judge my business practices. You're a television personality who entertains bored housewives, not someone who understands the complexities of modern corporate leadership. Maybe we should just agree that this is above your pay grade. I'll write Ms. Martinez a check to make her happy, and we can all move on with our lives." The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Sarah Martinez looked horrified at Marcus's continued arrogance. The bailiff moved closer, sensing something significant was about to happen. And Judge Judy, who had remained remarkably composed throughout this entire proceeding, stood up slowly from her bench. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 4 decades of legal experience and absolute moral authority. "Mr. Wellington," she began, her tone razor-sharp, "I have encountered arrogance in my courtroom. I have encountered liars, manipulators, and people who genuinely believe the rules do not apply to them. But I have never seen someone walk in here and attempt to dismantle their own life with such reckless enthusiasm as you have done today." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Judge Judy raised one finger. He froze. "You will not speak. You have spoken more than enough." The courtroom fell absolutely silent. Judge Judy continued, her gaze drilling straight through him. "You seem to believe that money is a shield. That success is immunity. That a television court is beneath you. Let me enlighten you. The law applies to everyone. Wealth does not erase wrongdoing. Status does not erase accountability. And you," she pointed directly at him, "are not special." Marcus's jaw clenched. His fingers tightened around the edge of his briefcase. Judge Judy looked to the bailiff. "Bring me the recording again." The bailiff replayed the crucial segment, Marcus's own voice stating, "Rich people don't go to jail for white-collar stuff." The sound echoed like a death sentence. Judge Judy leaned forward. "Mr. Wellington, that single statement tells me everything I need to know about your character. Your entitlement. Your belief that the world is your personal playground and the people in it your disposable toys." She turned her attention back to Sarah Martinez, who sat trembling with emotion. "Ms. Martinez, your testimony is credible, consistent, and supported by overwhelming evidence. You demonstrated courage in the face of intimidation, threats, and professional annihilation." Marcus stiffened, his eyes hardening as if preparing to argue. But Judge Judy turned back to him like a laser. "Mr. Wellington, you committed wrongful termination. You engaged in coercion. You attempted to force an employee into securities fraud. You threatened her livelihood, her career, and her future. And when confronted, you responded with arrogance so profound it borders on delusion." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "I did what every CEO does. You don't understand." "Quiet." Judge Judy's voice cracked through the room like lightning. The entire courtroom jumped. "You will not tell me what I do or do not understand. You will not tell me how to run my courtroom. And you will not rewrite reality to make yourself feel powerful." Marcus sat back down, visibly shaken for the first time. His face was blotchy, sweat gathering at his temples. Judge Judy exhaled slowly, her tone shifting from icy to lethal. "In all my years, I have never witnessed someone fabricate their own downfall as efficiently as you just have. You brought a shovel, Mr. Wellington, and you dug." She looked to the cameras, the millions watching. "And let the record show, arrogance is not immunity. Not here. Not anywhere." Then she turned to her clerk. "Judgment." The clerk nodded, ready. Judge Judy raised her voice so clearly that it echoed through every inch of the courtroom. "This court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Sarah Martinez. Damages awarded, $500,000. And additionally, punitive damages in the amount of $1 million. The courtroom gasped, even Sarah stared in shock. Marcus shot to his feet. "You can't do that. You can't." Judge Judy pointed at him so sharply the bailiff instinctively stepped forward. "Sit down." He obeyed, not from respect, but from fear. Judge Judy continued, "Furthermore, while this court does not handle criminal prosecutions, the evidence presented here today will be forwarded to the appropriate state and federal authorities. SEC investigators, the Attorney General's office, and any relevant oversight bodies. They will have a field day with your recordings, emails, and witness testimony." Marcus's face drained of all color. Judge Judy wasn't finished. And one more thing, Mr. Wellington. You claimed earlier that rich people don't go to jail. She paused, letting the silence draw tighter and tighter. You are about to become a very valuable learning device for millions of viewers. Because if the allegations presented today hold up in a criminal court, which they absolutely will, you will discover firsthand whether that statement is true. Someone in the audience whispered, "Oh my God." Marcus swallowed hard, his confidence shattered, his composure obliterated. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair with finality. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck the bench with a thunderous crack. Marcus Wellington did not move. Could not move. His empire was collapsing in real time, on camera, with his own words used as the wrecking ball. Sarah Martinez began to cry, relief flooding through her after months of fear. The bailiff stepped forward toward Marcus. "Sir, you need to stand." Marcus didn't look powerful anymore. Didn't look wealthy. Didn't look untouchable. He looked like a man who'd finally discovered there are consequences, and that he was about to meet every single one of them. In the end, the downfall of Marcus Wellington wasn't caused by the emails, the recordings, the witnesses, or even the law. It was caused by his own arrogance. He believed money made him untouchable. He believed power made him invincible. He believed titles, wealth, and status made him above accountability. But the truth he learned too late, is simple. Power is borrowed. Respect is earned. And arrogance is fatal. The world doesn't collapse when a wealthy man faces consequences, the world gets safer. Because every time someone like Marcus is held accountable, it sends a message louder than any courtroom verdict. No one is too rich to be wrong. No one is too powerful to be questioned. And no one, ever, is above the truth. In Judge Judy's courtroom, wealth doesn't win. The law does. And character does. And that's why, in the end, Marcus Wellington didn't lose to evidence. He lost to himself.